So I really mean this. If anyone knows a good animal science or vet that can answer these questions for me, that would be really great. And I want to say that some other folks would be interested in this too. Like, how did a Chihuahua come from the same species as like a Great Dane? Like, how's that possible, right? How did that happen? Okay, because how did those two dog breeds come about? Like, you've got one that is 5 pounds in the size of your foot, and then you've got a Great Dane, which if on its hind legs is like 6'6", right? Very tall. How is it that they're able to, one, like technically they could reproduce, and how did they come from the same species, right? I'm really curious about that. Like, and if you think about it, you're like, well, that's just the way it is. But think about cats, right? There are a lot of different types of cats, but they're all relatively the same size, right? Yet dogs are very different in their sizes. So I would like an animal science or vet to tell me answer these questions. Also, why is it that little dogs are the dogs that are the loudest and the yippiest? They yap the most, right? And why is it that big dogs aren't, right? They tend to be the ones that bark the most for any reason, at any sound that happens, and sometimes for no reason at all, right? I don't know, like a leaf like passed by and they have to bark at it, right? And big dogs just happen to be more quiet and less yappy. Like, why is that, right? Now, we know that the yappiest dogs, the littlest dogs, even though they are the loudest and they bark the most, that they would do the worst job at protecting your home, right? And we know that the big dogs, the ones that don't bark as much, are the ones that would protect your home better, right? And since this is where we get the expression of all bark and no bite, I want to apply that kind of mentality and that idea to our faith. Our beliefs and what we state we believe are like our bite, or like our bark, right? But living our beliefs is like our bite. Faith is our beliefs in action. God doesn't call us to only believe, and to believe in God, but to have faith. And so we need to put our beliefs into action. When we identify ourselves as Christians in our system of belief, that this is the system of belief that we believe in, but only keep to that statement, it's like our words have very little substance. It's like we are all bark and no bite. Wearing a cross, going to church on a Sunday, or putting up the appearance of being a Christian in your life are like words. They're like our bark. And they can easily become words without substance if there is no action, if it doesn't result in faith. The famous business leadership author Max Dupree states that if you want to truly know what you believe, you need to only examine your behaviors. And what Dupree is getting at is that we all have a set of assumed beliefs, these beliefs that we would state about ourselves, what we think we believe. But then our real beliefs are shown in our actions. A person, they might say something like, I believe in truth. I believe in telling the truth all the time. It is a core part and commitment of my life. But in difficult circumstances, that same person might lie to have some sort of advantage over another person, right? Their real core belief is not about truth. It is something different. And this can apply to our lives too. We might have a set of assumed beliefs that we will state out loud about how we approach our faith lives, but our behaviors, our actions, are the real defining factor. We may believe one thing about our faith, but when it truly matters, we turn away from it. Are we only Christian in our belief and in our words, but not in our actions and faith? And so that is at the heart of today's sermon, at the heart of Jesus' teaching. This was also lived by our modern day Hall of Famer, who is the Bishop Marianne Budde. She is the Episcopal preacher who received a tremendous amount of scorn and hatred over her simple message during the presidential inauguration. But she has been a lifelong doer of the word, and one who acted upon her core beliefs despite the hate and the death threats and the condemnation that she has received because of it. And so in order for us to kind of chew on this, we're going to turn to our passage for today. And it'll be on the screen, but it's also in your bulletins. And it comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 7, verses 24 through 29. And it says this: "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the wind blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell, and great was its fall." Now when Jesus had finished saying these words, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as having authority and not as their scribes. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So this text, it's important to know exactly where this text comes from. It comes from at the very end of the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus' longest sermon. It's his longest period of teaching. If you have a Bible in your home that has the red letter text, meaning the words of Jesus in it, this is the place in the Bible where there's the most red letter text in the entire Bible. And it begins in Matthew chapter 5. So he's been teaching for 2 chapters. And he teaches a lot of different things. He teaches things like that you've heard in many of my sermons. Things like being perfect in love by loving your enemies. Jesus also teaches in the Sermon on the Mount how to pray. And he gives the Lord's Prayer in the Sermon on the Mount. He also gives us teachings like how to give and not let your right hand know what your left is doing, meaning that you give in a fashion where you're not seeking praise for yourself, but you're giving because you want to give. Jesus also teaches in the Sermon on the Mount to be light in this world. Jesus also teaches that we should serve God and not wealth, right? You could serve 2 masters, or you cannot serve 2 masters. You cannot serve God and wealth. Jesus also teaches not to judge others, and a lot of other things as well. This is all in the Sermon on the Mount. And so the reason for why this text is such a great ending to this sermon is that Jesus wraps up the Sermon on the Mount with a challenge. That you have now heard all of these teachings. Are you going to live them or not? To be doers of the word, to be doers of what you have just been taught, and not just hearers. Now that you have heard these words, what will you do about them? Right? And so he's referencing the entire Sermon on the Mount, beginning in Matthew chapter 5. Because to Jesus, words don't really matter that much. It's faith that matters. Saying, I believe this or I believe that, wasn't as important to Jesus. But it's how one acted upon those beliefs that mattered. Belief without faith, without acting on those beliefs, is like building your house on sand. Your house will fall when things matter the most. Doing what you read in the Bible and hearing in church is someone who builds their house on the solid rock. Being challenged to live and follow Jesus is what doers of the word do. And this is the type of faith that I want us to have in this church. So I ask you, how many sermons have you all heard on loving your neighbor, on being light in this world, on the Good Samaritan, on pursuing social justice, or just showing others love? There are 52 Sundays in a year, and then there are special, sermons, special worship services like on Good Friday and Christmas Eve. I'm sure you've heard a lot of sermons in your life, is my point. I'm sure that we have heard a lot of sermons and our fair share of sermons on loving your neighbor. And if we build our lives upon believing in these things and say, I believe that this is a core part of my faith, but do not live them, then we are building our homes, our houses, on sand. Jesus was concerned with people who heard and then lived their lives based on what they heard. This is why this story concludes the longest recorded sermon that Jesus gave. Because it would be all for nothing if people didn't live according to it. Our actions tell us what our beliefs are, not our words. Our actions tell us. Our modern day Hall of Famer was no stranger to being a doer of word, of sticking to her beliefs when it mattered most, especially when she knew it would add hardship to her life. She truly built her house on the solid rock of Jesus. Our modern day Hall of Famer is Bishop Marianne, Budde, the one who preached at the presidential inauguration and asked that the Trump administration have mercy on those who are scared, is what she asked. She specifically named that immigrants, both undocumented and documented, but mostly undocumented, and people who are LGBTQ were scared, and asked that they have mercy upon those people. But she also knew how dissension was treated and was dragged through the mud for simply saying and asking to have mercy. She has received death threats, and her faith as well as her position as a religious leader have been challenged. Yet she still chose to preach that sermon because years of working as a leader in the church and advocating for those on the margins was something near and dear to her. She didn't let the possibility of hardship stand in her way of preaching what she knows to be true, what she lives her life on. Like what our texts say, when the rain fell, the floods came, and the winds come, her house was built upon the solid rock, and she was not shaken. She has led the Episcopal Church and championed the spiritual growth of the congregations that she is responsible for decades. And she has stuck to her theologies, she has stuck to her beliefs, she has stuck to her understanding of Jesus, who is ever present with those who are in need of mercy, those who are on the margins, and has worked towards justice in this world today. She even stated after this sermon that this sermon that had gained so much notoriety that it was actually a mild sermon for her. That it was a pretty mild sermon. I've read the transcript of that whole sermon since she's only being highlighted for a part of it, and I agree, it's a very mild, normal sermon. She called throughout her sermon for unity to be present on both sides, that unity in this nation, but called also for the most powerful people in this country to have mercy on the most vulnerable in this country. That there's unity across the board, from powerful to powerless. The beliefs and the beliefs that she lives is what has made her our Hall of Famer inductee today. And so as we consider our own core beliefs, if we believe in Jesus, if we believe in loving others, if we believe in a God that calls us to build a better place on earth, as we pray every Sunday in the Lord's Prayer, we have to put those beliefs in action. And this is what faith is. This is what faith does. It is belief that is lived. A faith that is built on solid ground is a faith that lives out what you believe, especially when it is hard. Our actions show us what we truly believe. So today, be doers of the word and not just listeners of the word. When Bishop Marianne first entered into seminary years and years and years ago, she fell in love with the writings of a theologian named Henry Nouwen. And I have a few of his books as well. And he wrote particularly about the struggles of people in Latin America. And in seminary, she met her future husband. But at the time, they didn't know that they were going to get married. But she faced a tough challenge. She faced a tough question. She had an opportunity, because of the theology that she fell in love with, she had an opportunity to work for a year amongst the poorest in Honduras, or stay in the United States with this man that she was falling in love with. And so she did what many would probably try and do. She tried to gently convince him to come with her. And he ended up coming with her. And so they ended up going, both of them, to Honduras and working in schools together. And she states that she goes with this wide-eyed optimism that she's going to go make a difference. She's going to go change these children's lives for the better, right? By just showing up, right? And that the people are just going to, these kids are just going to, turn their entire lives around. And instead, what she finds is hardship, is kids that seem to aim to make her life miserable. Many days she is simply reduced to tears. she would ask these questions. Well, what am I doing here? God, why have you brought me here? These were the questions that raced through her mind every day. 3 boys in particular gave her the most grief, and they're the Trujillo brothers. It seems that they actually enjoy making her life difficult, is what she states. And one day, 2 of these brothers, they're just throwing something in the classroom amongst each other. And the eldest makes eye contact with her, and this is what she remembers. She remembers that this 12-year-old seems to have hatred for her in his eyes, that he legitimately enjoys just doing this for the sake of making her life hard. And so that day she goes home and she prays. But she states that those prayers are closer to just cries to God. And so in a moment of frustration, she cries out to God saying, will it always be this hard? Even as a person of faith, what she hears is unmistakable. She hears this: yes, it is always going to be this hard. She didn't expect an answer from God. She didn't expect an answer in that moment. And so because of that answer, she says she just bursts out laughing. There's no solution that God offers. There's no, grand, like this grand word of wisdom, of life's mysteries being solved. Just yes, it'll be that hard. It'll always be this hard. But what she experiences is the sense that she is not alone. She knows that she is not alone, that God is with her. And so this instantly changes her perspective. She says that a weight has been lifted off of her shoulders, where she says that something like her ego suddenly is able to die, and she's able to truly be present. And so the next day at school, she shows up completely different. She says that she's able to listen to the boys better. She assures them, she's stern with them, right? She says to them that she's going to be with them for sure to the end of the year. Like, you're not getting rid of me that easily, right? I will be with you to the end of the year. And so during the remainder of that year, she's able to listen to them better. And she grows to love these 3 boys, eventually becoming their godparent. This experience in Honduras would undergird the rest of her life, knowing that God will always be with her in the hard times. But yes, there will be hardship. She has lived out her faith, even when hardship confronts her, even when she knows that she is creating hardship for herself. She knows that the hardship that she must endure. And we have seen it as she has spoken with grace and truth to her core beliefs. We can learn to be doers of what we believe by just looking at her example. So be doers of the word and not just hearers. Amen.